Leading up to the Batman, I've been reviewing each of the Batman films I hadn't previously reviewed, and we've come to the final film in this series, Batman and Robin? So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on Batman and Robin, and give me some context. Is this a movie that you saw in the theaters when it first came out, or did you watch it for the first time much more recently, or are you somewhere in the middle there? As for me, as we've discussed kind of all throughout this review series, I really did grow up watching this 4-film continuity of Batman films, starting with Tim Burton's Batman, all the way to Batman and Robin with all 3 Batmen. And these movies really were a huge piece of causing me to love movies, comic book movies, and get into nerd culture and follow movie news and upcoming releases. This was a huge part of shaping who I am, that I became someone that reviews movies for a living. And when Batman and Robin came out, I was as excited as anyone about it. I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and he was cast in this film. And I had enjoyed Batman Forever when it came out. I was in middle school, so it was probably the perfect age for the energy that movie was bringing. And then by the time Batman and Robin came out, I was in high school, a little bit more aware of things, a little bit more cynical about the world, and possibly for the first time ever, this was the movie where I remember watching a big blockbuster that I was excited for and being like, oh, that wasn't good. That did not turn out the way it was supposed to turn out. And I just remember feeling like, yikes, movies I'm excited about can be bad? And my eyes were opened and I became significantly more cynical that day. And the whole conversation over the weekend, anyone you'd run into, they'd be like, did you see the new Batman movie? What was that? Like, Batman clicked his heels together like he's in The Wizard of Oz and ice skates shot out of them. What was going on in that film? I'm baffled. And here we are 25 years later, and essentially the conversation hasn't really evolved. We're still like, wow, how did that get made? That was such a bizarre misfire, in particular, in light of where the Nolan films took the franchise, then Snyder continued it, and then as of today, the Batman releases. And in cinema, he's been such a dark character ever since that movie came out that when you go back and you rewatch Batman and Robin, it is kind of a bizarre experience. It is very strange how far off they were. With that said, let's get started talking about the good. And when it comes to the good, there are some very bright colors, the shots are in focus, and a bunch of people made a lot of money because of this film. But there are some problems here, so let's move on to the bad. And what makes this movie so interesting is that it wasn't plagued by production trouble. There weren't budget issues. It's not like the studio interfered with Joel Schumacher's vision for the film. No, Joel Schumacher was able to bring his vision for Batman to the big screen. He just happened to have a very strange vision of Batman that I'm not sure anybody else wanted. After Batman Forever, which had brighter colors, had anatomically correct bat suits with nipples and shots of bat butts and things like that, and some puns here and there, and certainly a campy, goofy tone, he saw that and he went, if they like that, let's crank it up to 11. Let's go all in on wacky, campy Batman, and removed all restraints, went all in, doubled, tripled down on the campiness, and delivered this very strange, bizarre film that from beginning to end is just a live action cartoon. But I'm not really even sure who the target audience is. Because the movie starts off, and the first thing that happens, once we get past like some credit stuff, is that it like zooms in on Batman and Robin's butts. And their chests showing off their sculpted bat nipples, or pectorals with bat nipples. Which is an odd thing to do if you're targeting kids. And given how goofy it is, where we're like, bat credit cards, doesn't seem like it's for adults either. So it's a movie that just falls into this weird spot of like having way too many butt and crotch shots for it to really be appropriate for kids, and way too many goofy moments for it to be appropriate for adults. I mean, it kicks off and the first dialogue is Robin whining like, I need a car. Chicks dig the car. And then Alfred immediately is like, I'll cancel the pizza. It's like, what's going on here? Then they go to a battle with Mr. Freeze where it turns into ice-capades. Like, everyone is on ice skates, they're playing hockey, and it's all choreographed, and then they're on a rocket ship. I mean, it is just so over the top, so overblown with everything that they're trying to do that it is a strange experience. It's just, there's no other way to describe it. It's not boring. I guess maybe that should go on the positive. It's not boring because at its worst, I mean, it just loops right back around that it's so bad that it's good. When you have the pre-poison ivy Uma Thurman talking to John Glover, and she's like swinging her finger in his face and just delivering these lines so over the top. It's fascinating. And then he goes, well, I don't take rejection well, so you're going to have to die. I mean, it's so insane. It is actually fun to watch. It's not a boring film. It is just not a good film either. And sitting through it for 2 hours of this ridiculousness is also a bit much. But it's a movie that I think misfires on almost every level. When it comes to the action, there's all these enormous, big, gigantic set pieces, but they're so goofy, staged, wiry, campy, that they're not like exciting action sequences. I mean, you just look at the opening sequence. It is a huge, massive set with a bunch of stunt people and lasers and rocket ships, but it's like people dancing on ice. Like, it really is like ice capades. And then they're like on a rocket ship, and it's just so overblown that you can't connect with it. And then, you know, there's chase sequences where they're like driving through these gigantic skyscrapers and stuff in Gotham, and there's nothing grounding it in reality to make it exciting. They take one of the great storylines from Batman the Animated Series, Heart of Ice, about Mr. Freeze, where Batman the Animated Series took this goofy character that was just like this kitschy, like, what if there was a bad guy that shot ice? And Batman the Animated Series gave him this rich backstory that's tragic about his wife and him losing his humanity. Well, his only human emotion is his love for his wife, and everything else is just the mission. And they take that and they have the tragic backstory and plot, but they combined it with all of the campiness of the 60s version of the character, and then pour on all the punniness, all the dad jokes that you can imagine.
I want us to be together, but I want to make sure you're serious about turning over a new leaf.
Hey, Freeze.
The heat is on.
Let's kick some ice.
And then on top of that, add even more goofiness to it, where you have Mr. Freeze watching Christmas specials while like, sing everybody, sing!
Louder, come on, sing!
And those two things don't go together. Tragic backstory about losing his wife and losing his humanity, combined with now he only speaks in ice puns and loves Christmas specials. They just don't go together. It's a movie where Bane is like this cartoony guy that's the valet and has like the hat on while still having this mask on, and everything is bright colors. And then there's a plot line about Alfred dying of a disease. And that is played totally straight. Like, has he lived a life of servitude? Is he really just a slave to Bruce Wayne? Has he enjoyed his life? Does his life matter? And then we cut from that to Uma Thurman in a gorilla suit, unzipping it, doing a seductive dance, and then Batman and Robin competing to spend money to buy a date with her, and Batman pulls out a Bat credit card.
$7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
Side by side with Alfred is dying. It's just such a misfire of like, let's try and have heavy emotions, but also put all the camp in that you can imagine. The whole movie plays like that from beginning to end. And then, you know, I think that some of the strangest parts to it are the way that can be faithful in one sense and taking a great Mr. Freeze storyline, and then they just invent a whole new backstory for Barbara, Batgirl. She's now Alfred's niece, which she seems awfully young to be Alfred's niece considering how old he is. And she becomes Batgirl. Why? Because she discovered the Batcave. That's the requirement to join the Bat family for Robin and for her. Just discover the Batcave, and all of a sudden we've got an outfit for you. Like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then they take Bane. And in the 90s, you have to keep this in context. Bane is a villain that was introduced in the 90s, and they did these big iconic runs for Superman and Batman where Superman dies and Batman's back is broken. And those were gigantic cultural moments in a way that you just don't have that with comics anymore. That any sort, like, no one really cares about the story arcs happening in Marvel or DC these days. But they had a couple of these things, both with Marvel and DC in the 90s, where people were paying attention and they would get like headlines. And there's this a gigantic moment. Superman died and Batman's back is broken. Bruce Wayne is no longer Batman. Gigantic thing. So everybody knew Bane, even though he's a brand new villain. And they decide, let's put him in this movie. And they kind of have the visuals right in a sense. In the sense that it's like the worst cosplay ever. Like if you saw this guy, the inflatable suit guy at a Comic-Con, you'd be like, okay, buddy, I know who you are, but maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And they put this in this gigantic blockbuster, and they turn Bane, who is an intellectual villain. Bane is strong, muscular, but he knew Batman is a serious foe that can probably defeat me in a fight. In their comic run. So Bane releases everyone from Arkham. And there's this whole run of Batman trying to get everyone back in Arkham, trying to save the city. And after Batman is drained, he's on empty, he can't do anything else, Bane shows up to break his back. There's a whole strategy. Because he's a brilliant strategist and amped up on the Bane venom. What is he in this? He's an idiot. He's just like a random guy that is experimented on and just turns into Poison Ivy's minion that's strong. Totally wasting such a great character. So, and putting him in movie form in such an embarrassing fashion that really embarrasses the character. Other things to talk about with this movie. George Clooney as Batman. I guess we should pause on that one. Of course, he's been the butt end of jokes for years now. He's apologized for being in this movie. He's apologized for the film multiple times. Anytime that it comes up, he loves to apologize for being in Batman and Robin.
Didn't you apologize to the crowd at Comic-Con for Batman and Robin? I always apologize for Batman.
And likes to be in on the joke and do self-depreciating humor about all of it. I don't actually think George Clooney is a bad Bruce Wayne or Batman at all. I think he's just in a terrible movie. So he never really got a fair shot. But if you think about like someone that looks like a Bruce Wayne vibe, that's George Clooney. George Clooney seems like, yeah, I mean, he can absolutely pull off billionaire playboy Bruce Wayne. And, you know, does he have the grizzled side to it? Maybe that's tough to say. But you can always watch From Dusk Till Dawn, Quentin Tarantino written, Robert Rodriguez directed movie where he's a very bad dude that's also a very tough guy that he did right before this movie. Where you could say he could have played a darker knight. He was just in this live action cartoon. So I don't think George Clooney is actually a terrible pick for the part. He's just in a bad movie. He's in a movie that didn't do him any justice and didn't do the character justice, and thus is the face of this monstrosity. So other ones on here, Chris O'Donnell's kind of doing the same shtick. He's not getting along with Batman. Times they have their back and forth. They're fighting over Poison Ivy. Nothing much to say there. Alicia Silverstone. It's tough to say how much is it her. She was miscast and how much was the characterization, but her kind of whole Clueless delivery. And if you don't know, Clueless is her big hit movie from a couple years before this film, where the Valley Girl kind of vibe when you play that with the characterization here, it makes her very unlikable. Because we know the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Alfred, and so when she's talking down to Bruce Wayne about how awful Alfred's life has been, we know she's wrong. So she seems condescending, like someone that's stepping into someone else's life to stand up for them in a way that isn't earned. It puts her in a bad light, and so then when she discovers the Batcave and becomes Batgirl, it's like it doesn't feel earned. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And even beyond that, like, there's just way too much going on in the movie. Like, she's like a street racer to pay bills or something like that, to like buy Alfred out of working for Bruce Wayne, which doesn't make any sense. Like, clearly she hasn't talked to Alfred. I imagine Alfred is probably doing really well financially. That's not really something he's probably needs to worry about at all. So she doesn't need to street race to do whatever she's trying to do here for him. I'm pretty sure Bruce Wayne will give him all the money he wants. Any money he wants, anything he wants, he can get it from Bruce Wayne. So it's just like some odd plot points combined with an actress that the thing that she's great at doesn't really complement her character in this movie. She's great in Clueless, playing the Valley Girl that's clueless, that grows, coming of age story stuff. Awesome at it. That's not really what Barbara Gordon is. And so it just comes off weird here, in particular because she's written adversarial to Bruce Wayne in the beginning section of this film. So one thing I can appreciate about the legacy of this film is that everyone involved with it owns the fact that it wasn't well received, and they're honest about it. First and foremost, of course, obviously George Clooney, but even Joel Schumacher. This is the most widely visible thing that he did because Batman's such a well-known property, but Joel Schumacher had a 35-year-long career of making a lot of great films, a lot of very serious films. And, you know, he did The Lost Boys that had a very 80s vampire energy to it, and he did This Is Very Campy. He did a Time to Kill. He doesn't have any of the camp, any of the gloss, any of the shine, any of the bright lights, any of the stylized. It's just a great courtroom film. He's just this great director, and he's real honest about his career. And so even on the Blu-rays, you can watch the special features where he just kind of gives his honest thoughts about it and says, yeah, I messed up. I picked the wrong direction. Blame me. Don't be mean to the actors. Blame me.
If I disappointed them in any way, then I really want to apologize, because it wasn't my intention. My intention was just to entertain them.
Likewise, it's kind of fun that Warner Brothers allowed these special features to be officially released with their movie, where you have Chris O'Donnell being like, yeah, I felt like I was making a toy commercial the whole movie. Like,
first movie, things felt much sharper. The second one, I felt like I was making a toy commercial.
I didn't know what was going on, and that's officially released Warner Brothers content, trashing their own movie. And as part of their own package for the film, they're talking bad about their own film.
The merchandising and licensing became a very, very important part of the making of the film. And I went along with it.
I appreciate that. When the actors, the production team are honest about what they created, how it's been received, and the studio's like, yeah, you can share your honest thoughts. I really appreciate that. And a lot of studios don't do that. There's stories about the behind the scenes of the Star Trek Blu-rays, DVDs, and special features, and like Robert Meyer Burnett worked on some of them. And he's kind of told some little stories about how they wanted to shave off the bad stuff. Nice and smooth stories. Let's tell the good. Let's leave out all the bad. And you can look at the Disney stuff. It's all, let's talk positive about it. And Warner Brothers actually lets people give their honest takes on the film. That's cool. That is actually, it's refreshing to have such honesty about movies. As for me, how do I feel about this movie? It was just one of the biggest budget misfires of all time, where you had all the budget they could need, all the money they could need. Look at the cast of this movie. It is a phenomenal cast. Maybe you can even argue one of the best casts of all time if you stop and think about some of the people that are in this movie, the different genres, the careers they went on to have. Amazing cast of the heartthrobs of the 90s, legendary action stars, and then George Clooney's. And then Joel Schumacher is a great director, done many great films. The writer of the film, Akiva Goldsman, right after he did this movie, wrote A Beautiful Mind and won an Oscar for it. The director, the writer, the cast, the character, all top-notch. The movie itself, the butt end of many jokes for 25 years. 25 years. And as someone that saw it in the theater opening day when it came out, I can say, like, legitimately, as someone that thoroughly enjoyed Batman Forever, it was an immediate shift of like, that's not right. That was not good. That was not the right direction to take things. And as someone that rewatches through the Batman movies every year, every couple of years, I don't think this movie is good. It does have a lot of so bad it's good elements about it because it leans so hard into such a terrible, wrong direction. Real quick before I give you my final thoughts on this classic film, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Let me know, what do you think about Batman and Robin? And did you see it in the theaters way back in the day? Are you new to it? Somewhere in between. Also, I've reviewed all of the theatrically released Batman films now. You can check those out in this playlist right up here, and I'll be updating all of my Batman rankings over the next couple of weeks. Batman and Robin certainly isn't a good film, but it is an interesting movie because they put so many resources and so much talent to execute a really bad idea. In which case, it's frequently so bad it's good, and it is a train wreck that's kind of fun to watch. So much talent in such a gigantic wreck. Overall, it's a D, but on the entertainment scale, it's actually a 6, and it's worth watching one time with your most obnoxious friends who will make fun of it with you. If you enjoyed this review, check out my other Batman reviews right over there, and over the next couple weeks, I'll be updating my Batman rankings that are right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.